Product Talk with Malthi.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Product Talk with Malthi. I am a product executive and a product leadership coach. In this episode, I'm very happy to welcome my ex colleague Rajan, who is a managing partner at Upeka, which is an AI accelerator that has invested in over 100 early stage startups founded by Indian founders but working on global products. Prior to this, Rajan was a product leader at Intuit and had done his own startup on computer vision. Welcome to this episode, Rajan.
Malthi, it is so good to speak to you again.
Thank you. And it's amazing, to connect after like 6, 7 years since the time you left into it and I left into it. And I'm glad we meet here again today. Yeah.
Likewise. I mean, Intuit is a great place to bump into other product folks, learn product management. I tell a lot of folks that, Intuit is one of the best places to learn product management. So glad that we could connect again.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think I owe a lot of my craft over there to what I did there, right? And Rajan, it's been so
Yeah.
amazing, right? I've been watching you from the sidelines, how you have grown up, how you have been very, very close part of the Indian startup ecosystem. I think you started with iSpirit, and in the last years, you have done some amazing work. Specifically, you started with SaaS products, then you have now focusing on AI SaaS products. Why don't you just give a little bit more sneak peek into what you've been working on and what is occupying your mind these days?
So these days, I think everyone is talking about AI, and I mean, I actually believe that it is not a hype. It is probably underhyped in terms of what it can, do the changes that it can bring. But of course, the horizons are different, right? So yeah, like you said, for me, for the last 10 years, since 2011, 12 onwards, was work around SaaS, software as a service. Not only while I was working at Intuit, I joined Intuit end of 2010, 2011. At that time, I got introduced from a Intuit perspective, but I was also looking at a lot of SaaS companies that were just getting started, whether it is Freshworks, ChargeBee, or many of these other companies, more from a sideline. I was working closely with them with uh, via the organizations that you mentioned, right? iSpirit, which is a nonprofit think tank, and then I was also part of something called as NASCOM Product Conclave. These organizations were more about like how do you build products from India for the rest of the world. Since 2011 or 12, I would say that I have worked or observed many SaaS companies that are coming out, right? So that was that wave, and that started because in 2009 cloud came into the world, and SaaS as a application started becoming relevant. In fact, one if one were to say that SaaS applications, they started in 2003 when Salesforce really got started, and few companies like Zoho, they took over, and then in 2007 they brought SaaS into India. But Freshworks and ChargeBee, the current crop of great SaaS companies from India, they all started in 2011. So that was that platform shift, Malti. And in 2007, I had worked in an AI company, and back in the days, I would say it's a dinosaur stage of AI, right? So I used to work on computer vision. I hand coded something called as SIFT feature vectors. Back then, if you had to build machine learning applications, you had to hand code features for applications that you're building. And then I saw that the AI is not ready for prime time. It was not solving business problems, and not just me, but anybody who would pick AI, they'd all be excited more from a research side, but the research did not get translated into product. So I spent a lot of my time just focusing on SaaS, where I saw software, in the form of subscription business model, was creating a lot of impact. So a decade plus was focused on that. But then when ChatGPT came along, I was like, okay, what had happened? So just like how cloud shift happened in 2009, there is this big shift that has happened with respect to AI. And that's what I like to call as is there is a difference between a traditional machine learning and a Gen AI. And that's the shift that happened, which was really epitomized by ChatGPT. In fact, what you can say is that ChatGPT is like the starting gun of the new era of AI. And what it does and what it means is that it brings AI below the API. And before that, if you had to build AI applications, you have to hire your machine learning engineers, data scientists, do a lot of custom work, and really spend like millions of dollars in making sure that one AI feature is working for the product that you're building. So when this platform shift happened, I was like, okay, I need to go back to the thing that I knew before, or like 15 years ago. And then I had to do a lot of catch up, a lot of reading, and I had to see like what are the things that I'd missed. But really, I'm very excited because the AI now is actually a platform shift, right? And I'm trying to spend a lot of time saying, how is AI going to impact. I'm sure like you would have seen this Twitter threads last week or like even a few months ago, is people are saying, is SaaS dead, is software dead? um,
Yes.
these are hyperbole, but they didn't ask this question 5 or 7 years ago. So there is something really about AI. I don't believe that SaaS is dead or software is dead personally, but it is going to impact in a way which is as exciting as cloud or mobile. So that is what has been keeping me busy in the last 12 to 15 months, Malti.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. I think what you said is right. I mean, I would say this is probably like a whole paradigm shift or a very tectonic shift, right? I mean, ever since Chat GPT got that chat interface, suddenly the whole thing has been democratized, and it is now accessible to everybody. And we are kind of definitely witnessing a huge milestone in the technology era.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah, so I'm very excited, very, very excited. Right? So I actually see that a lot of founders who had actually gone into retirement, for 10 years, 15 years, I see a lot of VCs. They're all now becoming builders. They're all becoming founders, because like there is the start of this new, very exciting wave, and what it will lead to, like how web led to in terms of search, in terms of e-commerce. So those type of redefinitions of like what can happen in the societies is what is triggering a lot of
Correct.
these guys to come out of
Yeah,
retirement.
yeah, absolutely. In fact, I want to share, the last cohort for AI products that I had taken. I had one gentleman who is basically a angel investor, 65 years old, and he was attending the course, right? So it's like people are really curious to see how they can make understand or what they can make out of this whole new technology aspect of it, right? So yeah,
Yeah,
very, very,
absolutely.
very true, Rajan. So Raja, I mean, you have kind of witnessed this whole, as you said earlier, from SaaS products. Now you are seeing that, is what is going to be the future, right? Is it going to be kind of hugely augmented with AI? So right now there is something new happening every week. Literally, it's and sometimes even days. Especially, I think last week or last week when Google also did its announcement, OpenAI also did its announcement. So there is a lot of hype out there, right? So in at this stage, right, with so much of going week after week, month after month, how do you see that the products which are being built from India, let's say the Indian AI ecosystem, how is that faring as compared to other geographies?
Yeah, so one thing I would say before answering that, right? So in terms of the first part that you said, I love this quote, which goes something like this: like the technology has arrived, is but it is unevenly distributed. Like the future is arrived, it is unevenly distributed, right? So Gen AI has arrived, but it is very unevenly distributed. If you actually put things into perspective, right? Only about 200 million people have used Gen AI in its new form of Gen AI, right? It's not quite where WhatsApp is. It's not quite where mobile is. It's not quite where internet is, right? Where it is a couple of billion users are using it, right? And even if you look at like mobile or internet in India, when it started having impact in a big way, is when it crossed 500 million users, right? So we are not there yet in terms of just the adoption itself. So we're very, very early,
Exactly.
right? So in some places where all the techies hang out, we all hear about AI everywhere. So we live in this bubble of saying that it is completely arrived. But the Gen AI, just in terms of like mass market, it's not fully arrived. So anything that you do would be something would be very interesting and like very impactful. If somebody is working on a new job or a career path, they should be actually looking at AI, because very, very early, and it is real in terms of just the platform shift, right? In terms of how India versus US is, right? There again, I would say that the hype train of AI has not landed in India at all, right? Just to give you some reference point to think
Mm-hmm.
about. So if you do a simple search on Crunchbase or any other sites that actually track the amount of investment that are happening, In India, in the last 6 months, five, right? So June we just started. So last 5 months, only about 150 million, 150 maybe 165 million dollars of investment has gone into something that you would tag as Gen AI. Now, when you take the same thing and then say US, it is $30 billion,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, that is not to say that India is a small market or something like that. See, when you globally think about India, India is the third largest startup ecosystem,
Right.
right? On two metrics. One is the number of startups, and then number two is this number of unicorns that come out, like US, China, and then
Right.
India are the three largest startup ecosystem. But on the AI side, the hype train has not hit,
Mm-hmm.
right? The AI hype train has not hit the same way e-commerce hit, cap commerce hit, like all these D2C hit, etc., right? So I think from an India perspective, we are still a little bit early. But then the other thing also to think about is from an India ecosystem versus US ecosystem is US ecosystem is about platforms, about infra, right? So if you think about like major investments of this $30 billion is actually going into infrastructure.
Hmm.
I don't know the exact split, but I would actually argue that it is more than 75% of that investment is going on there. And US or Silicon Valley or whether it is Boston, most of these places are like well suited to build like software
Hmm.
infrastructure, right? Whether it is storage, whether it is compute, whether it is models, whether it is inferences, etc. Now, traditionally, India's strength has been when we are building global software as like
SaaS.
SaaS and things like that is more on the application side,
Right.
right? So those applications where like you're building on top of platforms is where Indian founders have been able to build good global businesses, right? And I would also say that there is a nature of the platform business, the infra business, where it is very oligopolistic, which means that only five or six players are going to be the top guys, or maybe it is monopolistic in some cases, or like there are, if you look at the cloud, there are only three cloud
Right.
players, right? I mean, there were many cloud players that started out, but eventually there are only three cloud players. So from a platform perspective, US has an advantage, and India should actually play to its strength, which is on the application side. So where we will see the rise is on the application side, and particularly I am excited about not any type of applications, but what I call as vertical, unsexy, boring industry, where you take like a use case and go really deep, solve it really well, something that the incumbent doesn't want to solve, something that the Silicon Valley upstart doesn't want to solve. And that is where India's ecosystem will have an advantage. In fact, like this is something that I put out as a report in March called the AI SaaS opportunity report. And a lot of founders came back and said, okay, this thinking makes sense because this is deeply resonating with us.
So, one question I have here is that there is definitely a lot of hype here, and you are right. I mean, especially we as techies, when we move around here, there is just, whether it is in media, when we are talking to our peers, there is just a lot of hype over there. Now, when I'm talking to other product people also, I think one of the areas where they struggle is that how do you really identify a genuine problem, whether it really requires AI or not, right? So, how do you find that genuine opportunity and map it to the right AI solution strategy? So, I probably want to go back and ask that, you've been working with a lot of these early stage startups, right? So, what is the advice, or how do you see that these products, when they're kind of navigating around that, doing this problem solution mapping, how are they looking at if they really need AI or not?
So I had to actually change my approach a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
See, both of us have come from Intuit, and the first thing that I would tell any engineers is go talk to customers. Or if somebody comes from a sales background, I'd go and tell them that sell first. Right? Either do customer discovery or do sales to understand the problem better. Now, like founders and PMs, I'm actually telling them slightly different, and that is orthogonal of what I said before. I'm actually saying build first. One of the things that I would say from a AI perspective is that we have to actually tap into very low hanging fruits first. I'll come back to the topic of low hanging fruits. People are going and solving like very very difficult things in a space where things are changing. Like Malthi, you said before, right? This is a space that is moving so fast. One thing that most people don't appreciate is the fact that how fast it is changing. Every 6 months, it is 10x different. What I mean by 10x difference is that if you were using a speech API and you're using that like 6 months ago versus what you're using today, is like phenomenally different. It has like 10x difference in it. That is what I mean by like it is 10x different. Now if it is 10x different, then what all you can build using that is like phenomenally different, right? And what are use cases that were possible, viable before, the equation for all of that changes right now. I will come to the aspect of what should a product manager do, but let's just take this example through like a tangible example, right? So all of us know Alexa,
Mm-hmm.
right? Alexa was like a darling product, right? It was a darling Christmas gift in 2017-18 time
I
frame,
got
where
one
like
too.
anybody wanted to give a, yeah, you got one too, right? So at Diwali and Christmas, that was like a darling product. But you know that from a product perspective, it's a $2 billion failure.
Correct.
From a, when you look at it within
Correct.
Amazon, right? And what was the biggest thing for them? Like, what was the simple use case for Alexa? The simple use case for Alexa was that I was asking weather, I was asking what is in my calendar, maybe time, and then I play music, right? For a device which was supposed to be intelligent, which was supposed to be an alternative to Siri, it actually just got reduced to these four tasks. So when a product manager, when we look at product manager, like we are thrown use cases, and we are supposed to actually come back with business cases, right? When we are putting our product management hat, somebody will come and say, hey, I've come up with this idea. Then we're like, hold on, like let's just look at other things. Let's understand the persona, let us understand the problem, let us understand like what are the things that we are promising to the customer, right? And then we also look at one thing as a SaaS product manager, saying what is the frequency of this, right? Are we building a product which is going to be used daily? Are we building a product that is going to be used monthly? And is the right persona and the product combination that is going to have the high frequency or not? These are the questions that we ask. But when it comes to AI, AI is adding about intelligence. And when you think about intelligence, you're basically saying that you go ahead and make a decision on my behalf, right? Now what is the downside of making that decision, and what is the cost and complexity of making that decision? These are two other parameters that a PM has to add along with persona, promise, problem, frequency, right? And when you add this for like something like Alexa, weather change, if you get it wrong, like it's not the end of the world. I mean, like like, okay, fine, if you get some things wrong, it's not the end of the world. The cost of going wrong on this particular task is this very low. And to even learn this, right, is this very low, because you just have to actually do some very simple machine learning. But then if you were to say that, Alexa, just do real time language translation for me, today it is possible through a web application, right? You can go to something like 11 labs and it will help you do language translation. Something ChatGPT will help you do it. But if you were to do it in the device at the edge, even today it is not possible. Now if you had that use case, right, the ROI for that use case is still going to be high. So one of the analysis that came out of the Alexa, like $2 billion business case, was that, look, I don't want to make money when I'm purchasing the device, I want to make money when I'm actually using the device. So it was a great Christmas shopping gift, but then what are we using it for? We are not using it for real language translation. But in 2017, if you had done real language translation and tried to put it at the edge of the device, the complexity of that and the, like consideration of that going wrong, if it went wrong, then immediately will switch
Hmm.
off. And but if you had to like build something which is going to solve that really well, then you had to spend a lot of money. So the unit economics of that would have not worked in 2017. It still may not work in 2023 or 2024, but in 2025 it will work. So long story short, Malti, what I would say is that as a product manager, it is our job to figure out this cost of understanding the concept by AI and this decision consideration. These two questions has to be added to say, hey, this unit economics, is it working out when we are thinking about problem, persona, promise? And this is a moving target,
Correct.
right? In 2017, it would have been terrible, but in 2024, it is like a great business case to be built. Now, if Alexa started today and did these things, then that that $2 billion like investment is going to be worth like what, $20 billion or more. So what I would say is that, like As product managers, we need to pick low hanging fruits, right, and then kind of make progress with that. And at this particular point in time, I would actually say keep track of tech, keep track of how the changes in tech is actually changing cost structures, right. I would go to the extent of making the following recommendation, right. I would say that, if you have an M2 laptop, go please install Mistral on a local machine, and then turn it into like a local, like, Jarvis for you, and then play around. The recent Mistral hackathon, a PM was a winner, right? One of the things that is happening with respect to Gen AI is, like I said, it is moving AI below the API. Like a lot of product managers are able to build applications on their own without having like a heavy dependency on, like, let's say, like an engineering team.
Right.
And if the Devin's promise of the future were to come true, then product managers will be, like, the most important person, because it's not just about the build, it is about making that particular business case
Right.
work. If the business case doesn't work, then then we're all going to sort of try out, do experiments, and then we'll walk out. That's a long answer for your
No.
question. So I often say that the product manager is like a translator. Customer is speaking Punjabi, your engineer is speaking Tamil. So it is your job to actually make the translation.
Absolutely.
So now you have to also learn machine learning as another language, and then you have to add the translation. And the funny thing is that this language itself is changing so
Correct.
fast,
Correct.
right? And that is where it is even more hard, where, like, the grammar of the language is
Correct.
changing, right? So but then the good part about, like, product manager being like a linchpin around this, like a key person, is product managers are translators, because they can learn that language, and they are the one that are translating from, let's say, the investors, the board, to engineers, from customers to engineers, from engineers to the rest of the place. And the big change right now is that at this particular point in time, the product manager has to play a lot more attention to what the engineers can help them with.
Absolutely. But I think I want to add 2 points here, Rajan. That is very well said. One is that I think somewhere Gen AI is coming more as a savior, because as the language is changing, I think it is kind of being, for the lack of a better word, a co pilot helping the product manager to navigate through that. Now, since you've kind of
Correct.
worked with a lot of startups, and we kind of spoke a lot about that, do you recommend any
Hmm.
kind of a playbook, or some kind of a structured approach when product managers or founders are looking at, how will the ROI for this investment look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been researching this question for the last 15 years and trying to sort of find a framework to get to product market fit. I would say that, I've come to the conclusion, and I have, like, maybe tried 15 frameworks, like, in the last 15 years, right? Come to the conclusion that product market fit is more art, and there is, like, an engineer inside many of us that is actually trying to make it a science. But having said this, like a couple of months ago, I gave a talk on saying, from an AI SaaS perspective, how can you break it into three stages of crawl, walk, and run?
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that I know from a experience from a founders, like, going through product market fit, is it goes through a lot of pivots, right? In large companies, it is very hard to experience this, because the first pivot itself will kill the project. But in startups, what happens is it goes through a lot of pivots. And so if you look at something that started, like, what was the starting idea, is not the idea that actually eventually becomes successful,
Absolutely.
right? And so therefore it becomes very hard to actually put a framework around this. So what I would say is that in the crawl, walk, run, here are the few high level things that I said, right? So in the crawl phase, no GPU, no open source, right? Focus on finding the use case, right? And finding the use case, like you were talking about, language is changing, right? One of the challenges that is happening right now is Gen AI is has become this whole wide empty canvas. It's very hard for human mind to actually make sense of empty canvas. So you actually break it down into categories. That's why market maps and category maps become very important. That's why Gartner has become important. That's why VCs become important, where they are the one who actually come up with some market map. Eventually, one of the market map takes over. So you have to make a sense of, like, which layer or which category within the market you're operating in, because each of these market categories, they have their own dynamics of how customers are buying, how much money is needed to actually win in this category, what are the alternates in these categories. So those are things that get shaped up. So I created this 4 or 5 different layers, saying applications, horizontal, vertical, applications. And then one thing it is interesting about AI is that AI is not about just application, but focus on
Hmm.
outcomes, right? And if you focus on outcomes, then how do you combine these applications and outcomes? This is what will be very different. And people are calling this as software 3.0 or services as software, this whole outcome aspect, right? Then there are builder tools, then there are infra, then there are models, right? And then there are, like, data prep, and then there are GPUs, right, and semiconductors. So if you think about it, first figuring out like which area are you operating, and within that area there are different dynamics, and within that dynamics, if you can actually nail the use case where you know that people are very very interested in, like, what you have to offer, they are willing to pick you over the alternative. In fact, there are 4 steps that I would say, right? How do you get found, how do you
Hmm.
win, how do you delight, and how do you actually get retention? So you need to have like a predictable way of getting found. People will call that as marketing, people may call that as sales, but you need to be able to generate a lot of
Right.
pipeline, right? And then, like, why are people going to use you over the alternative? That is something that you have to have a good answer
Hmm.
to. How are you going to delight the users? Like, are they going to say, oh wow, I'm very very happy with this? And how are they going to express that happiness? Once you have that happiness expressed, then you say, okay, now I'm going to sort of upsell them something, like, I'm going to retain them, but I'm also going to upsell them something. So that find, win, delight, and retain, or even upsell, right? Those are, like, 4 steps that you can think about. But this one, without even having a
Hmm.
GPU or an open source. Once you nail that, then you can move to the next one, right? And what happens in my own experience, Malti, is that we will go through at least 3 pivots. And I often say it's a very counterintuitive thing. I often say that it is better to pivot 200% than 20%. And people get, I would say, jailed by their vision, right? They are imprisoned by their
Yeah.
vision. They think that this is the vision that they are building, but often when they go and talk to customers, when the idea meets the road, right, when the rubber meets the road, then they realize that this is not taking off. They, like, people are not picking you, they are not happy, they are not talking big things about you. So therefore there is a struggle in all the 4 steps of find, win, delight, right, and
Yeah.
retain. Now, how do you actually keep changing the idea, right, to actually land here, becomes very, very critical,
Hmm.
right? Once this is done, then I would say that, then it's a question of, like, scaling your solution, scaling your GTM. Now, in scaling your solution, the entire industry is actually having a big bottleneck. And that big bottleneck is going from pilot to
Hmm.
production, right? Most of the people are all doing
Which
demo,
has,
not a lot of people are in
yeah.
production, right? Because the trust, there are 3 or 4 parameters that has to be solved: accuracy, reliability,
Hmm.
right, and like, great UX, right? If you don't have these things solved, then adoption won't
Right.
happen, production launch won't
Right.
happen. Now, once, like, you have done this, then you get to like a couple of $1 million in revenue, then you can actually scale, right? Then you can like run really really fast, where you can think about how do you go beyond founder led sale, or how can you add another channel. And the answers for these, if you see, is different from, let's say, a prosumer company, is different from, let's say, a mid-market company, company that is building from India, company that is headquartered in the US. The answers are
Right.
different, and that is why it becomes very difficult to actually put together like a
Playbook.
framework which is, or like a playbook which is, oh, you start here, you go, and this happens. I rather of view that, you should only look at tactics. Okay, what are tactics that give you, like, uh, a temporary advantage, right? And then with the objective of moving forward. And there, again, there are two broad dimensions, right? So companies that are venture scale and companies that are not venture scale, they may actually use slightly different tactics, and it may be okay, right? Companies that are venture scale, they have to get to 100 million ARR in seven
Hmm.
years. In fact, that entire definition has rechanged now. It's become 500 million ARR, because that's where companies are getting listed. So how in 7 to 10 years you can get to 500 million ARR? That's like, if you think about it, it is like
Hmm.
crazy. I often call that as like you have to become that rocket
Right.
ship. If you are, let's say, just a Ferrari, it is not good enough. In 5 years, you got to 10 million, it's not good
Right.
enough, right? 100 million is what you need to get to, like 800
Right.
crores. right? So you're saying that in 7 years to 10 years, how do you get to anywhere between 800 crore to 1000 crore? The thing is that, like, 10 years
Uh-huh.
ago, 100 mil ARR was a club. There were 10 companies in the world, they got to 10 million, and everybody in the world stood there and then
Oh.
clapped for it, saying, oh, wow, we got to 100 million
Okay.
ARR. Because back then, nobody
Hmm.
believed that there is room for more than 1500 mil ARR
Hmm.
company. But there are 150 companies today,
Okay.
right? So we underestimated by 10x. As an entire software ecosystem, we underestimated that, like it is by
Right.
10x, right? Now, but like, you have to put that into perspective. See, 10,000 companies got funded, and out of that only 150
Hmm.
got, right? And maybe another 150 are like public, and so there are only about 1.5 to 3% that had
Right.
happened. But we thought, it will be far lesser than that,
Hmm.
right? Now, the challenge now we are facing is, because so many of them got to 100 million. Now, 100 million was not good enough to get listed in the
Hmm.
market.
So the next.
So there are lot of them are there at 100 million. So now they're like 500 million. They are the one, like, fast
Right.
growing company, right? So that is what has driven this, as opposed to AI coming
Hmm.
in. Now the belief is that, maybe if you have AI in it, it will get to 500 million
Faster.
faster.
Yeah. You probably don't have.
Because at least we have
You
not
don't
seen
have a
it.
walk anymore. You probably crawl and then you just start running.
Yes and no, Malti. I would say, why? Because, like, see, this is what is most fascinating for me, from a if I look at it from the last 12 months perspective. I wrote this blog post, is widely shared. Like, Inflection.ai made a $1.5 billion product market fit mistake,
Hmm.
right? Just because you have, like, a lot of money does not get you to product market fit, and does not get you comparable. Now, here are some stats, right? I put it out on the blog post. Yeah, Inflection.ai raised a lot of money, but still was not able to get to product market
Hmm.
fit. And raising a lot of money alone is not
Hmm.
sufficient, right? So if you think about, see, when ChatGPT did get to, like, 1 million users, 100 million users really, really fast, they didn't have any other reference point. In fact, they beat all other reference points. Like, Twitter got to 100 million maybe in a couple of years, right? The
Correct.
Instagram maybe 2 years. That was their only reference
Correct.
point. But now, when you have Inflection.ai, they were like, look, we need to build a language model. That language model will compete with ChatGPT better.
Hmm.
And Inflection 2.5 is where they were actually investing their time and effort
Hmm.
on. But they forgot the basic product
Correct.
principle. The basic product principle is that, if a ChatGPT exists in market, why will somebody pick Inflection or Pi as their, like, end user application was
Hmm.
called, over
Hmm.
ChatGPT, right? In 12 months, ChatGPT went to 180 million
Right.
users with 85%
Right.
retention. And in the same 12 months, November 2022 to November 2023, this was the statistics for ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
But March 2023 to March 2024, they were at 6 million users,
Wow. Okay.
right? With 60% less retention.
Hmm.
And their only argument was that, oh, we have memory and we can give search better. But that did not work
Right.
out. So there was no
There's
point
no
in
key
building all
differentiation
that
over
infra.
there as to why a customer.
There is no key differentiation over
Right.
there, right? When you don't have any other alternative in the market, then whatever you do is a differentiation. But when there are other players in the
Correct.
market, the basic product lesson is you need to find a differentiation and have to actually harp on it.
Agree.
So it, right? So how fast you grow with respect to the references that you have becomes
Hmm.
important, right? So just having, like, AI, or like having like a language model, like, this is not going to help you get there faster, right? So
Correct.
so that's why they were acqui-hired,
Yeah.
right? So they raised a lot of money, but this comes back to the venture scale point that I was saying, that, when you actually build a venture scale business, right, people, like, do some investment and then run some experiments and then see that whether it is going to become a venture scale business or not. And Inflection.ai did not actually exhibit a venture scale, regardless of, like, the money that they raised. So then they were like, okay, if this is not a venture scale experiment, then, so let's scrap the experiment. This is what Microsoft did.
Right. Yeah. No, I think any point of time, I think some of those first principles thinkings have to be kept in mind. And, you cannot do away with those things. So the foundationals have to be in place. Yeah.
Yes. What are you seeing in India in terms of how product managers are dealing with?
So right now, see, I think the buzzword is AI, and I think I do see for the product managers with whom I interact, they are definitely making all use of resources which are available out there to learn. But I think there is still a lot of confusion here. Should I become more technology oriented? Should I go ahead and learn Python? Should I go ahead and learn how to build machine learning algorithms, right? I would say product management for AI first product is in that kind of a infancy stage right now, where they are still trying to
Where
figure out, what does it mean for me to start managing an AI first product. But I think they are still grappling with some very fundamental questions of how do I identify if I have the right use case? How do I even talk to my leadership to make them understand what AI can do? Because AI as a technology itself is in a very infancy stage, right? There are lot of unknowns there. There are still, we do not know what is a right modeling or the right technology that needs to be leveraged for that. So I think from a skill perspective, from a understanding perspective, there is a lot of interest, but there is also a lot of chaos to understand where do we go from here, right? So I think that is what I tell with the folks that whom I work with, is that guys, your role doesn't change. You are still as part of that Venn diagram where you have no business, customers, and tech. You still continue to be there. Probably your tech a few years back was, let's say, a three-tier structure architecture that we have. Then maybe yesterday it was blockchain. Now today it is AI. So for you, that doesn't change. You still need to be into that core area where you become the advocates for your customers. You understand what makes sense from a business perspective to get the ROI aspect of it, and understand the technology so that you are able to have that translation the way you were saying earlier. Continue with that, right? But having said that,
yeah.
I think we all are kind of be on that rocket ship to say that, hey, how does that accelerate my career? How do I contribute back to the organization where I'm working with? But there is still, I think, a lot of I would say lack of awareness in terms of what AI can do. Of course, some people are far ahead. Some people are still kind of trying to get onboarded onto the rocket ship. But that's where it is. But there is a lot of chatter. There is definitely a lot of chatter.
Got it. What are what you're saying is that look, they need to, like the translation analogy, right? Which is they just need to learn another language. Their role of as a translator doesn't change,
Exactly.
because the people that they translate to, they are still the. So in this translation, who is actually doing a bad job and who is doing good job that you
Okay,
see?
I I wouldn't say a bad job, but I would say in every level, Rajan, there is a lack of no, not everybody has a complete understanding of how this is going to go, right? So I think in every layer, whether it is at the leadership layer, whether it is with the stakeholders, whether it is with the folks who are developing it, they all are just getting to discover how to leverage it. Is this the right technology? What does it mean for our business? What are our strengths and where do we add value? So I think every layer is still on the path of discovery there.
So what do you think, will a Gen AI application be able to give a much better prioritization than a PM?
I would say they are probably definitely a lot of productivity boosters. They can probably get them started. For example, even when you're in an ideation phase, they give them much better structure. But I think the core part of it, the value part of it, still has to come from the human.
Yeah. So I my take on that same question is that the core job of a product manager is his
Right.
prioritization, right? And that prioritization is like a combination of the user insight, changes in the market, the constraints within the organization, what kind of team you have. All of this has to be factored in, and then say what kind of feedback you're getting, like from your customer support. All of this has to be factored in. Maybe there are some assessment that can be simplified if you use AI tools, but that aspect of saying at Intuit we used to talk about that spidey product skills, right? That spidey product skills, I don't think
Get replaced.
AI can
Absolutely.
still skill get there. And that leap of intuition that will come in terms of saying, okay, this is why we need to actually highlight this aspect of the product over that aspect, that I don't think will get taken away
Correct.
from a human judgment, right? I mean, that's where the ROI, the decision consideration is the highest, right? And how you prioritize a product is the highest one from
Yeah,
a product manager's perspective.
completely, completely. I mean, I think that is where the core value that a PM adds, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to also ask this question of saying who is doing a good job of doing this translation that you have seen in PM circles in India.
So I would say, I think folks,
What products?
yeah, probably I can add my bit here. I think folks who come with definitely with more computer science background, with tech background, they are definitely able to have a deeper understanding. They are able to get their hands much more faster, dirtier with kind of with various use cases, with the new products which are coming in. I would say they are definitely, and especially I have personally seen a few data scientists, data engineers who are transitioning into the product management role. I think they also have an edge over others because they understand the data language. They understand, they are getting a grasp of the business world of things. So they are able to see the this whole problem identification to the solution mapping. I think they are able to do a better job there. But if you are going to be
Yeah.
talking only, let's say, purely from a technology side, if you go into two of the spectrums, right? Either you continue to stay only on the business side, or you continue to stay only on the solutions, technology side of things, and don't come to a common ground, then I don't think you're really doing a good job there.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think those people who come from a data background, they will understand that language a little better, right? They'll be able to actually sort of move from the traditional ML that they were doing to Gen AI really really quickly, as opposed to someone who's just trying to understand ML in general, right? And so they are going to have, like, longer learning
I
cycles.
agree.
That makes
I
sense.
agree. And probably since you've kind of seen so many of these different products coming from very diverse industries, any one product or one use case which stood out for you, something very unconventional that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, I may end up talking a lot about my startups, but but okay. Before I talk about startup, I actually have been a huge fan of this application called
Uh-huh.
Suno.ai. I've been recommending that to a lot of my friend. I'm become like a big influencer for them, and I'm unpaid influencer for them. But Suno is this app which allows you to actually become a music director in 2 minutes,
Oh, okay.
right? So you can go to suno.ai and then, generate music which is like studio quality, professional quality. You can literally, in what you generate in Suno, you can take that and put it into a movie and nobody will be able to tell a difference. It is that good.
Wow.
So if you see, last year it was chat gpt, then mid journey. I think the latest in terms of a killer app use cases is Suno, where they're doing text to audio. And I generated 2 3 music, and like literally in front of like my friends in 2 minutes, and then they were like, oh, they were not able to make it out that this was generated by AI. So if you look at what I love about Suno, is it, I like to call it as what it is doing is compressing workflow.
Mm-hmm.
Something that takes like 6 weeks
Hmm.
to do, multiple people
Hmm.
coordination, and there are business model implications on that can actually be done in 2 minutes. two
Yeah,
minutes like after the podcast you should definitely check
I'll
it
do
out,
that.
right? Yeah, so this is like a fantastic example of that, like compression of workflow, 6 weeks to 2 minutes, right? So the role of a music director or a music creator, then that becomes that of a curator as opposed to a creator,
Hmm.
right? Which is the common theme of any application, any AI application, if you think about it,
Right.
right? Now this was not possible, like a couple of months ago, maybe definitely a few years
Correct.
ago. And these type of things are what technology is enabling. So if text to, song generation is possible, so what does it mean? Like, can you take that and apply it into marketing? Can you say, I want a different background music for the videos that I'm creating,
Hmm.
right? Or can it read the image and then come up with a suggestion for, the background music, an appropriate one that should be done so that it can improve the
Right.
CTR? Now, if this fundamental building block is available, then marketers and product marketers will
I do
use this
see.
on top of it and then say, what
You
can I do? And that's where, like, the new use cases that are possible are like great, right? So that's why I keep saying that as product managers we should go back and play with a lot of these tools, because these new toys that are coming out are like mind
Yeah.
blowing. Now this is on the consumer side, right? So on the application side, there is a startup that we work with. It's called Spine.
Mm-hmm.
What it does is it allows car
Mm-hmm.
dealers to create professional looking photos of their cars that they're trying to sell. What would take 2 weeks, they're able to do it instantly. So if you're selling a high end car, you'll have to take the car and then go to a studio and then shoot it there, and then you will use that image, and then when you upload it on your website, then that lifts your click through rates, or lifts your conversion, right? This is something that high end car dealers know. But now you can use their tool and allow, like literally in 2 minutes you can use their studio. In 2 minutes you can just take a normal iPhone photo, and then it'll
Oh,
make it look like
I will.
a swanky, it's a swanky model, right? Now with that, then your conversion is going to go up. So this is like a very good use case for me, where AI is taken and applied in a boring, unsexy vertical,
Hmm.
right, which translates into business
Makes
case.
sense.
There are others. I mean, I am also a big fan of this other company that I'm working with. What they do is this text to 3D.
Mm-hmm.
And text to 3D is something that ChatGPT cannot do, because the models that they use, they don't allow 3D to be created. And then like the 3D that you generate, you should be able to
Hmm.
animate, right? And to animate, you need to create this 3D in a certain way. You need to have a certain polygon count, and then these 3D that you generate, then you should be able to load it into games, because usually games or animation videos is where you're trying to load it.
Right.
Now this part, ChatGPT cannot do that well, because the model that they use is very different than what would generate a model like
Mm-hmm.
this. So there's another company called Metabricks that I work with. What they do is they do this text to 3D, and this is something which is far ahead in terms of, again, it takes something that will take 6 weeks to
Correct.
build. It can be done in 2 or 3
Right.
minutes, right? That compression of workflow. And for a game developer who pays on a per character basis, right, now he can create as many 3D characters as he
Mm.
wants.
Right.
So it's almost like a
Of
democratization
this
that
thing,
is
yeah.
enabled for
I
him,
like the
right?
word that you
So
said,
this
compression of
again,
workflow. This is the first time I'm hearing that. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? You are kind of really optimizing your time. And I think the other part which you said, it's, I think a lot of use cases in the creator economy, right? I think definitely that is one area where this whole AI and generative AI has transformed it like in multi layers. Probably,
yeah, here is another example that I would share, right? So 3 months ago, if you had asked me, somebody came to me and said, I'm working on a mental health startup. I'm like, look, I'm all for mental health. I want to solve that in the world, but that's not a startup idea at
hmm,
all. And I would say that, if somebody is having a mental health problem, I'm not talking about the clinical ones, but the general ones, please send them to Kapil Sharma show, because most of the mental health problem can be solved by just
yes.
comedy, right? So you just have to let loose and not really take yourself too seriously. But then there is this another company that I work with called United We Care.
Mm-hmm.
What they have done is they have created an AI powered mental health care
Okay.
professional. And what they are able to do is they are able to take 20 meetings away, 20 calls away of a health professional in the US,
Okay.
right? So this is a serious problem, and they all dial in to a particular toll number and have conversations with people. Now because AI has gotten so good, right, and these folks have actually just taken the mental health problem, they have gone from top all the way to creating their own LLMs
So it's like a
and
digital twin for the
solve.
therapist, is it?
It's a digital twin for a therapist. And what happens is, in healthcare you cannot go wrong,
Hmm. Correct.
right? So what they have, you cannot hallucinate, you cannot say things which are not accurate and things like that. So they have built their language models, they have built their knowledge graphs on top of it, so that they can solve hallucination, and then they have built this twin, right? And they also have a switch over to the human mode. This again is like a use case that I am fascinated by,
Hmm.
right? In how they are able to actually build this and create that
Correct.
impact.
Wow. This is very very how do I say? Kind sounds like very breakthrough. But what is like the success ratio? I mean, it also sounds a little scary, Rajan, because you are literally saying here that the human is going to be replaced by a AI bot, for lack of a better word, which is basically answering the patient or providing therapy to the patient. But I mean, is it in production ready, or is it still in?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is in production ready. They are like, doing
Wow. Okay.
tons of revenue and things like that, right? So they are like a 3-year-old, 3 or 4-year-old startup.
Oh, okay.
um, these are use cases, right? And these are real use cases where adoption is happening, where AI is getting
Hmm.
applied, where where people are using this in real life
Correct.
setting. And there are challenges that comes up, right? Like I said, hallucination cannot be done. Google also, if you really think about it, they did a good job of solving, using in Google Health. I mean, then, general consumer, their general consumer use cases always blows up in their face. But if you look at how they've been able to solve from a Google Health perspective, because the data is very
Correct.
clear, it's very siloed, and then they are able to go and solve those hallucination problems there. So there are some use cases. One thing that I see is that the adoption in AI today is either 0 or
Hmm.
10x. If you are working on the right use case, there is 10x growth.
Hmm.
If you're not working on the right use case, then it is zero growth. And which is why I keep telling people that go to low hanging fruits,
Hmm.
right? And iterate your vision
Right.
also.
Correct.
Right? And vision is a very imprisoning word.
I know. At times, when you suddenly have arrived at it, you feel it's very liberating. But you're right. Sometimes it also gives you a box around that from your thinking perspective.
Yeah. Correct. So I always tell folks that vision is this something that is most beautifully seen in the rear view mirror of your where you have reached. You say, "Oh, this is exactly how I thought I will reach here. I became successful," and then you can tell a nice story about it. But just standing and then saying, looking at it and saying, "This is where we will go," and then just sticking with that. That's very hard in a 0 to 1 state
Right.
startup.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Wow. I really cannot tell, in the last 50 minutes that you and I have been speaking about, I think I have kind of imbibed so much new things and, learnings and a variety of different use cases and products and tools that you spoke about. This is going to be loved by the audience.
Awesome. No, I had a fun chatting with you as well, Malti. This is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rajan, and look forward to hear, talk a lot more post this as well.
Yeah, I'm excited about what's happening in the field of AI and what kind of product that will come
Yes,
out.
yes, yes. And thank you so much.
You should check out Suno.
Mutually. Yeah, yeah. And thank you so much, Rajan, for taking the time out and coming over in this episode. And lovely talking to you.
My pleasure.
Product Talk with Malti.